So, ma'am, our first question is to the both of you. Any of you can go first. Um, so, all of you are feminists, as we've heard. So, what's your take on feminism?
You go first.
Either way, Shruti, if you want, you can go first.
I've been dying to answer this question
Go, go, go. And
because
I'll follow you. I'll follow you. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's one of the most misused and misunderstood words of our time because going by the narratives that I see on social media, primarily Twitter, there's a lot of discussion on feminism, and it's almost like people don't really understand what it is. It's come to become this really demonic word that stands for women who are cuckoo and asking for unreasonable demand. I mean rights and demands, but uh, you know and and a lot of argument comes from women themselves. Let's leave men out of the equation for now. They say like, I'm not a feminist, but I'm an equalist. What do you really mean by an equalist? This is like the most, I think, widespread justification because I think the term has been demonized so much that sensible people don't even want to associate with it for some reason. They would prefer to call themselves equalist. Now, you can call yourself an equalist if the playing field is level in the first place, which sadly it is not. Uh, if you think of life in the world as a race, if a man starts at 0, a woman starts at -10, and even if you bring the man down by -5, the woman up by +5, and they start from the same point, it's like the man is running free and the woman is running with boulders around her ankles. So the term equalist is okay if the starting point is same, if the playing field is level, but it's not. So essentially it means equality, for both genders, but people perceive it as uh, like women demanding superiority for themselves. So I think somewhere the communication and the narrative also needs work to sort of let this idea percolate down in a healthier way. I don't know. Probably, we can arrive at something with this discussion. But right now and of course there is a section of people who obviously have to give up their privilege if feminism does come in, become a reality, and there is equality of sexes. um, but it's not like you're taking away from somebody. You just There's also one more argument. I'm sorry, I'm just jumping over my own words, but there's also another, men and women are not the same. Same and equal are two different things. We're not saying that we want to be physically same and we want to have the same body as men, or transgenders want to have the same body as men. We are all different and unique in our own way. Or we're asking for the same rights and the same dignity and the same freedom and the same opportunities. Uh, I do not understand why that is so difficult to grasp. And this whole negative narrative around feminism is probably something that uh, people like us should work towards.
Yeah. So a couple of things I concur with Shruti. I think the whole narrative between equity and equality is very important. And the moment you look at feminism, and for everybody who argues that why can't we call it humanism, why can't we call it equalism, why can't we call it whatever, the thing is that it's called feminism because it keeps the struggle of women at the center, and that is something that you cannot negate from a historic and a political perspective. Having said that, there are two quotes for me that sum up the idea of feminism and why it is so important to me. One is that feminism is a radical notion that women are people. It's literally as simple as that. Whether it is notions of respect, it's notions of opportunity, it's equal pay, it's dignity, it's right to space, right to language, right to conversation, right of sitting in the same room and having a voice at the table. It's all of that, right? And there was another that I really saw recently, which said that we should just say that feminism is not the label. You should just say either you're normal, which means that you're a feminist, or you're sexist. And I think that really works really well because that's how it needs to be. Given that we live in a world where what we really need is an inclusive ideology that has space for all genders, has space for everybody who identifies in a different way, is intersectional in nature, which means that it is class, caste, agnostic, and feminism is that ideology that really cuts across the various intersections of society, which has unfortunately made a lot of divisions and hierarchy for us. And if you look at in my introduction, I think we missed saying that I'm also an activist. But in the activist movements, and if you look at the history of the activist movements, and especially what we're seeing right now, you will realize that women voices are at the center of it all, and it's all becoming very, very sharply intersectional when it comes to politics, when it comes to citizenship, when it comes to farmer rights, anything at all, right? So something that cuts across the inherent divides that our culture is based on is feminism. And to also borrow from something that Shuchi said earlier, privilege. The reason why there is so much anger and so much disdain towards this word is one, of course, the complete lack of understanding of it. And also at the same time, the fact is that to somebody who is privileged, equality will feel like oppression. So what we have to constantly help people understand is that equal rights, it's not a pie. It's not like, if the share for women becomes bigger, the share for you shrinks. It's not that. It's about creating more equal opportunities across genders is really what the task is. So I think all of this together is something that mainstream conversations on gender, on feminism need to be. I also feel like for me, in like, if you ask me what are the things that people in the feminist movement need to keep in mind, one is that it needs to be like, many times, when things become mainstream, the texture of the voice gets lost, so it becomes somebody else's point of view on your struggle. You have to make sure that that doesn't happen. So if it is another gender that you're fighting for, it has to be their voice on the table. Our job is to be empathetic and to listen, right? So these things, and I think with the Me Too movement, a lot came out into the open. A lot of us who had been fighting in silos came together, and there were more and more conversations. But apart from workplace, now the whole conversations around harassment and violence, those conversations need to move into the spaces of the home. And the moment they move into the spaces of the home, you will find that they will be even more contested. It'll be even more difficult because our culture does not allow for people in the family to be called out for their misdemeanors and for their misbehaviors and for their mistakes, not even mistakes, for their actions. It's not a mistake. So that is, I think, something that is pivotal because the more you speak to women and the more you speak to survivors of harassment, violence, and abuse, they will tell you that the first experience was in the space of the safe space of the home. So it is critical that conversations now reach spaces of the home. We, of course, are the ones who create problems everywhere we go, including the homes. But we need more like us, and we need more of those conversations to happen to really sharply attack these issues. So those are a few of my points and my take on feminism, if that answers your question.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now my question is to Suchi, ma'am. We hear that you're a fabulous writer, and two of your books, I'm Big So What and Done with Men, are like two of your most popular books. Are there any personal experiences that are linked to your book? What inspired you write? What inspired you to write them?
I think if not totally autobiographical, every writer, every author does put in a bit of themselves in all their works. That said, Done with Men is not so much a feminist book as the other two, like I'm Big So What and A Cage of Desires, which I think are more relevant to the discussion that we're having today. The main inspiration for writing these books was I wanted to tell the stories of contemporary Indian women. and talk about themes and challenges that are relevant to us today. So I'm big. So what was more about body shaming? A plus size girl growing up, in Delhi, for example, and facing the whole challenge with self-esteem and growing up plus size in a world that is obsessed with thinness and stuff like that. And she growing up, finding her self confidence, finding her self-esteem, accepting herself the way she is. That's the theme I have sort of touched upon in I'm Big So What. A Cage of Desires is more about a woman who's unfulfilled, both emotionally and sexually in her marriage. Um, and how she breaks out of that shackle and again finds her footing in a new life, and the challenges that she has to face there. Now, when we talk about violence against women, the first thing that obviously comes to mind is physical violence, women getting beaten up and stuff like that. But sometimes what we don't really address is that psychological violence and emotional violence, these are also forms of violence and very, very legit forms of violence. And although the physical bit of it can be seen, cuts, bruises. Obviously, it's not just your body that is hurt, it crushes your soul as well. But emotional abuse and psychological abuse is so rampant and so widespread, and many women don't even realize that it's happening with them. Something as small as bullying, uh, not just like very, very obvious bullying, but just a family member demeaning you, or for your spouse, for example, saying that, oh, that woman is so hot, why can't you be more like her? Things like that are also violence,
That's
because slowly over time that chips out your self-esteem. It kills you from inside, it crushes your confidence, it makes you lose your sense of self. So I mean, those forms of violence are so innocuous that we don't even realize that they exist, and they're so normalized as well. We're like, "Ye to hota hi hai." But and something like your parents comparing you to other, your peers, or um, you know, people being sidelined for being slightly different. For example, the LGBTQ community. Imagine the kind of ostracism that they face for most of their lives. Isn't that a form of violence as well?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And we also, like, when you write about books like these, I mean, like such topics, we know that there are a lot of opinions from people. Like, some of them may have liked the book, some of them may have been against it. Like, what did you go through? Like, how did you overcome those difficulties?
So, in terms of books, I've maybe been fortunate that I touched upon certain bold themes, especially in A Cage of Desires. It was about a woman exploring her sexuality outside marriage. So, but for some reason, it did not face the kind of backlash that I expected it to. And nobody came back at me and saying that, you're destroying our culture and, promoting adultery, encouraging people to have sex outside of marriage. That did not happen. I think because they were able to empathize somewhere with the protagonist and somehow in their heads justify her actions. But in the real world, as long as you're in a sheltered, shielded existence with either a husband, or you're staying with your parents, your father, your husband, your existence is very cushy. What I have realized after being single, having been married for around 13 years, and separating and going out in the world as a single mother, it is doubly difficult. I mean, you don't even imagine the kinds of challenges that will be thrown at you. Something as small as, how homeowners not willing to give their house on rent to you, you not being able to fit into a society because people who are, couples or regular, family people, they kind of judge you for your character and you find you questionable. Things like that. You go for any paperwork, they'll ask who's your husband, who's your father, as if your existence by yourself does not matter at all. You're not taken seriously. Everybody's like, they'll just not, you don't have any weight, if you don't have a man standing behind you. So these problems, I think it's very recent that I'm facing this, and I think it's the very first time that I'm talking about this in public as well. But it's a has been a very eye-opening experience, and stuff that I sort of took for granted all these years, that's sort of falling apart. And you realize that you're surviving alone just by yourself. As an individual, you have to work like probably 4 times as hard to be seen and heard.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on that and add a couple of things as well. So, since we're talking on singlehood, so I'm a single woman as well. 34, fat, single, articulate, against establishment. The whole package is a perfect recipe for trolls. Okay, it's
Older
perfect.
than you, man, imagine.
Yeah, I totally can. I could see it. So you are a package for
I'm a
people to
package.
come and
Yes.
attack you. That's just how it is.
All
And
the check boxes are crossed wrong.
completely, exactly. So that's exactly how I also live, right? And somebody who used to smoke, somebody who works late, the whole thing. So and I travel alone a lot. I love solo trips, and it's something that I really really enjoy. And there have been times, when you're entering the hotel and you ask for your keys, and somebody looks at you and says, "Lekin, ma'am, आपके mister?"
Huh.
There is no mister. Can I please have the damn keys?
Huh.
So I remember I was in some like really small place in Gujarat. I was in Ocha, and they asked me this question, and I said, "Whose name is the reservation under?" So they said, "Soumya Bejal." I said, "What does this card say?" It says Soumya Bejal. I said, "Then why the hell is this question?" So they were like, "No, but you can't come alone." So I said, "What does that mean?" So the whole thing is that at every step, you are forced to almost get people to validate your existence. And
Exactly.
as a single woman, it becomes a lot harder. But I also want to say that as single women, I can tell you that right now in India, we are 73 million in number, the highest ever. And what's happening is that because women are becoming more and more aware, strong, articulate, and clear about what they don't want to compromise with, that they're that we are, all of us are very clear about what we don't want. The idea of compromise shifts, but trust me, the worst kind of gaslighting, conversation abuse, whatever, comes actually from familial spaces.
Yeah.
And it'll be in the most benign manner. It'll be in manners like, "Oh, what will happen to you when you're 60? Who will take care of you?" Marriage is not an insurance policy. It really, I mean, we need to stop treating it as that. Or when I used to be overweight, it took me years to used to yeah, still overweight, but yeah. So it took me 4 years to shift a conversation from shadi ho nahi rahi to shadi kar nahi rahi. It's an active choice. It has nothing to do with my body shape, with my body type, and so on and so forth. So the thing is that I think you're fighting battles every day. They're newer ones. Every time you should tell yourself that this is a battle you must fight. I think what happens is that when we win each battle, we get even more strength to fight more, and it sort of keeps going in a cycle. And I also feel that in India in the past 5-6 years, I have seen a rise of solidarities there, really. I mean, across feminists, who across genders, people who sort of come and stand by and lend voices. And I think that movement, is the whole thing coming together, is a big deal. And I think systemic changes can happen, given that we are the voices that we are. Because in the context of violence, and again, coming to something that Shuchi also mentioned, gaslighting is one of the most prevalent forms of mental abuse that we all go through in our families. Then there is trauma that is inflicted upon you. We are a country that still does not recognize marital rape as a crime. So if a man is legally married to you, he's allowed to rape you by law. So the fact of the matter is that we live in a country where violence against women is normal. It is the extent of a rape that gets you to sort of get angry and get onto the roads, but the number of times you read rape in the newspaper is bloody normal, right? So that is the issue within the family setups, the patriarchal setups. Whether it's not about them favoring the man all the time. It's as harsh to men, with लड़के नहीं रोते, चूड़ियां पहन के बैठा है क्या, the whole works. But the fact of the matter is that we are not a society or a culture that fosters or makes space for open conversations. So even if you're going through something, you're encouraged to keep shut. And that has resulted in systemic, cyclic forms of violence of different kinds. Whether it is domestic violence against women, it is marital rape, it is sexual abuse of children, whichever way, it's emotional abuse, it's mental abuse, whichever way you look at it. Because you're not encouraged to talk, you can't find a solution. So, and I think that those are the fundamental things that need to be looked at, shredded, and changed, to just sort of add to the single women dimension and everything else.
I'd like to add something on marital rape here.
Yeah.
I was having a discussion with a friend some time ago, a guy. Uh, he just could not fathom how you could possibly rape your wife.
Yeah.
मतलब शादी करी है तो मतलब वो रेप कैसे हो सकता है? तो I try to tell him that, a woman, even if she's married to you, still remains a woman, still remains an individual. She might at times not want to, be intimate, or might not feel like, or, maybe your relationship is not.
Or
Uh,
can just say no, yeah, that's all.
no.
Yeah.
But I think it stems from that whole idea that once a woman is married into a family, she becomes the property of that family. So you can do whatever you please, whenever you please. बीवी है और हम सेक्स भी नहीं कर सकते जब हमें चाहिए तो फायदा क्या है? So it was so appalling.
Yeah, it's ideas of ownership. And I still remember in fact, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because they're two completely different conversations across two completely different classes that come back to me on marital rape. I remember I was doing a play somewhere in a village of UP, and we had a few scenes on marital rape, and women with ghungat still here came up to us and said that, we didn't even know this was wrong.
Yeah.
It's been done to our mothers, it's been done to us, it's being done to our daughters. This is just the way things are. You cannot say no. So,
Yeah,
and then we had to sit down and explain. And then the moment we reached the legality of it, they said, "Arey, ye to kya fayda hua, beta?" That sort of thing.
तुम्हारा फायदा था शादी करने का.
Exactly. And then and cut to a completely different conversation in a very fancy MNC that I used to work in. And this man, a colleague of mine, had come up to me and said that I'm not equating rape and what I'm about to say, but why isn't denial of sex a crime? And it took me 10 seconds to just fathom the question. That denial of sex means what? As a woman married to you, I'm not obligated to, offer myself for your sexual pleasure. Kya bakwas hai? So this whole
that you're entitled to sex
exactly.
anytime you want.
So this whole idea of ownership, this whole idea of entitlement, we are fed on a staple diet of this since we're children. Across our texts, across culture, across cinema, across poetry, आपको सिखाया ही ये जाता है. So by the time you sit and unlearn it, and then it's a pretty long battle.
Yeah. And, we sometimes feel like domestic violence is something that's happening in villages with rural folks and, not in our world. But, as an urban woman, salaried, working in an MNC, I know 5 people who are battling domestic violence and sort of, fighting cases for it. So if there are 5 people in my tiny little circle and I'm not even a very social person, I have like a handful of people that I know, उसमें से भी 5 अगर करें तो it is not a fringe problem. It is, if I just extrapolate that stat, across the population, then
these
it's
stats actually all stats point out that urban audiences cases of domestic violence are very, very high. It is not a village problem.
And then there'll be people who will justify कि close relationships में तो हाथ उठा दिया तो क्या हो गया. They'll try and rationalize it कि like movies like Kabir Singh, for example.
Amazes me. It amazes me. But
Yeah,
again,
and
it is something that again we're taught as children ना. जब बच्चे बात नहीं मानते हैं, आप क्या करते हैं? आप थप्पड़ मारते हैं, right? For discipline. So
yeah,
whose discipline, whose authority, whose power? These are all questions that have to repeatedly be asked.
yes,
Otherwise, the whole idea of power and notion in Indian familial setups is inherently very, very skewed towards the male patriarch, right? So
yeah.
that becomes an issue anyway. So we are constantly talking. Anybody who wants to jump in into that,
That's okay. That
people
was the
can.
whole idea. And
Yeah.
Soumya, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. Why do you think the whole label of feminism is so demonized? Is it because some young people sort of interpret it differently, or that whole men are trash?
Yeah, I
Friends.
think
What
I
is
think
it?
there are
I mean,
three.
where are we going wrong somewhere in
I
setting the narrative right?
no, I think that there are three major issues. एक तो issue ये है कि भाई people don't read. When you don't know and you assume and then you go ahead and read an interpretation, this is what happens. And our
Yeah,
country is a prototype of that reality today, given
yeah,
the way
yeah.
we follow religion. Right? So that is one clear problem. पता है नहीं, बोलना पहले. And it's a standard issue, na? Like, so the whole commercial angle of Women's Day infuriates me like nothing else. I'm sorry, Women's Day is not about free manicures and pedicures.
Yeah,
It is about historic struggles for voting, for bread. I mean, let's respect the sanctity of what you're trying to celebrate, right? So one is this complete lack of knowledge. The second is this I often say this in various fora that it's almost like men wanting to make everything about themselves.
yeah,
So this whole thing about feminism is not anti-men. It is in
yeah,
fact pro-men. And that's what we say everywhere. That the issue is that you feel that something being pro-women is equal to being anti-men. Why? We are not, I think the enemy definition has been a problem in its interpretation. We have been
it's
very
man
clear
versus
that
women.
enemy, yeah, I mean, we have been very clear that in feminism, our enemy is patriarchy.
Yeah,
And it does
yeah,
not stop women from being patriarchal either. Women are extremely
of course.
patriarchal, a large number of them. I mean, Karwa Chauth is your greatest single example of how patriarchal women can be. But again, it is being perceived as the fact that men are the
Victims of
enemy.
feminism.
So and again, तो वहाँ conversation change हो जाता है. तीसरा ये है that as women are changing in Indian social structures, we're becoming like our generation is more independent than the generation before us, right? So the way we are being brought up and the way we will bring our daughters up is going to be very different from how men in our generation are being brought up. They don't have the same bringing up that we did. A lot of us became by default because women should become independent. I want to train my daughter to be independent, but nobody taught the men how to deal with us.
Yeah,
So automatically your defense mechanism became, oh, what a feminist bitch.
feminist type, बोल रहा feminist.
Feminist type, feminazi. I'm like, आओ बताओ feminazi और मैं बताती हूँ क्या होता है. So it's that, and honestly, I think coming back to violence for just a second, the whole vitriolic sense of violence, if you really want to see how unchecked violence can be in this country, and genuinely how it is almost all of it is sexual in nature. Look at how we get trolled. So look at how women journalists, the most powerful women journalists in this country, get trolled. Look at people like us who write. Almost everything is a description of how the troll would want to rape us. It is a complete
Yeah,
graphic description of it, about where, how, when, what, all of that, right?
dragging our mothers into
Earlier
it as
it used
well.
to earlier it used to be anonymous. Now you can even see the name. Now, what that tells you is how normalized the idea of violence is And secondly, how legitimized it is, which is the even bigger problem. Now, whether you look at the patriarchal structure in terms of politics from, the governing party or whatever, or you look at it from a culture in which we belong in, the fact of the matter is that sexual violence against a woman is the only way men know how to discredit a woman,
Put
which
them in
brings
their
us
place,
back.
so to speak.
Yeah, exactly, it is all about power. Acid
Yeah.
attacks, rape, all of this is about showing a woman her place, औकात दिखाने के लिए किया जाता है. It is not about gratification of any kind. It
Yeah.
is very, very clearly about power. And what that does is it shows you this whole legitimizing that has happened of violence, which really, really now needs to get questioned. So anonymity has made way for names, for graphic descriptions, for tags, and it's all unchecked, right? So I think it's important for us to peel, every layer that comes with violence of different kinds. Cyber violence cannot be shunned away after a point also, because we've seen, I mean, Gauri was shot, right, at point blank range for being an articulate female journalist. So I think these are the things that even the idea of violence needs to be expanded. The idea of violence needs to be seen in the context of the culture that we live in, and in the context of the politics that we live in, and then seen what does sexualized violence, what does any other form of violence mean. Because I mean, Kamla says this really well. Kamla says, who put the society's honor in my vagina? It's the
Yeah.
same thing, that the trolls feel that the rape threats are the farthest that they can go to try and get a woman to stop talking. There are no financial threats. There
Yeah.
are no other threats. There are no threats of kaam nahi milega, naukri nahi milegi, whatever. It boils down to that, because you think that is the most violent way in which you can attack a woman. Yes, it is. It does not change the fact that it is not. It is a very violent way of attacking the woman, but it comes from this seeding in of how her
This
honor
is the worst you
be
can do to
taken
a
away.
woman. Yeah.
Yeah, so beyond pain, beyond inflicting the most horrific form of violence, and detaching a woman's agency from her, when it comes to rape, it's also the honor that they are trying to attack. And again, it brings this back to the question that, bhai, samaj ka honor mere vagina mein nahi hai bhai. It's okay, like, really. So
Yeah.
these which is why I feel that almost every sentence has politics attached to it, and we need to again keep dividing, keep peeling off the layers to understand really what is being said and how it's being said at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we have taken over for too long.
sorry.
Guys, would you like to say something?
Please interrupt us. We'll take off.
Please,
Yeah.
feel free to ask questions. We're just going on and on like bilkul.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So our next question is to you, Sona ma'am. Uh, we've heard what it's like to be a feminist and an established writer. Tell us more about how to survive in the field and how to deal with the constant criticism and the hatred sometimes that you get.
Okay, how to deal with it? Honestly, there's no mechanism, to be honest. I think the way I deal with it is I see other writers who are way, way better than me, doing far more impactful work, really, than me, and taking far greater dollops of hate than I do. And and because you sort of know them, and you look at the kind of hate they go through, I think it all boils down then to final solidarities. So I don't really, I think the only way I deal with it is to come up with the next piece that I hope will get more trolling than the last, because I'm like, acha, ab agar karna hai to chalo अच्छे से करते हैं, like troll me and troll me well, sort of a thing. So but yeah, I'll be honest, I not to romance it, it's not easy. There are times as long as it's on the digital fora, it's on Twitter and Facebook and all, that doesn't really matter. when people start calling you, then it's a bit of an issue. And that, you're like, okay, how do you deal with this? But even then, there are people who are women writers who are taking on such huge powers and writing the way they are. I mean, whether it was Gauri's work, or it is Neha Dikshit, or it is Arfa, all these people, or Rana Ayub, you look at their work, look at the quality of their journalism, look at the way bravely that they are at it, every single day, with the kind of reports that they come out with. I think that just gives strength, to be very honest. My pieces, of course, are more cultural in nature, and definitely more opinion. And again, like I was saying, I'm the complete package for trolls. Wire पे article आ गया, फिर तो मतलब given है कि trolling होगी. तो it's not an issue anymore. It's really a non sort of an issue. But having said all of that, I think what does bother me is something that I touched upon in our previous conversation when Shichi and I were talking. This absolute impunity with which violent rape threats reach you. That impunity, and where is that impunity coming from? Where is that legitimizing coming from is the question you need to ask. I'm sorry, was somebody saying something? Oh, I think someone went on unmute. So anyway, so I think that's really, really the question. And there was a time when I used to think about, actually responding to the trolls. जब वो कम होते थे एक दो तो मैं सोचती थी अच्छा चलो let's try and correct their political leaning. Then I realized it can't happen. Then I thought let's try and change, this vitriolic stance on women. Realized can't. Then I thought let me change their grammar. Realized I can't. And I also realized that is also a very privileged conversation from my end. So then I just started ignoring them. Ki bol rahe ho, bolo, just doesn't matter. So yeah.
Grammar wala, I think, is phase 4. We are still at phase 0.
Yeah, grammar is also like my privilege, right? I know the language, so I can correct it. So then I was like, chodo, koi fayda nahi. Yeah.
Ma'am, so we have another question for you. So there's this like a very preconceived notion of how women are portrayed in cinema, in Indian dramas. So what's your opinion on that? Do you think that notion should be questioned?
Yes, I think that notion needs to be questioned every single day. And that's what we do, right? So now if you look at it historically in Hindi cinema, women have been mere props. So the 1950s in mainstream Hindi cinema, you had a time when women were playing as pivotal roles in films as men. So you had a Madhumati, which the poster for which is actually behind me right now, which was a story centered around a woman. You had very powerful films like Sahib Bibi or Gulam. You had, which has its own one little issue, but I'll come to that later. Or you had Bandini, you had Sujata, genuinely socialist films with women at the center. And you also had films like, Shri 420 or an Anadi, which were on the man, but the woman played a key role in maneuvering the story in a certain way. That changed drastically in the 70s. So all the way until Aradhana, Amar Prem, you had the same thing coming. But the moment with the rise of the angry young man, women became mere props around the man. So the mothers became either people to be pedestalized or to be treated like vermin. Or you had, the woman who was your wife or your love interest or your supporter needed to be the subservient woman who would be there for you despite whatever she goes through and all that shebang. And a woman who actually had desire, who was articulate enough to, to show you her desire, or even if it is not merely bodily desire, but it was, even to say smoke a cigarette or go somewhere or whatever, she became the proverbial vamp. Again, somebody you could demonize in the film by the virtue of all of this, which is not typical that of women, which is again a very patriarchal construct. So life changed in the 70s, continued to change. 80s, let's not even talk about it. 90s, so matlab rise of Govinda and the end of everything else. You were looking at objectified women more than anything else ever. There was a parallel movement in the 80s which had a completely different power structure when it came to women, some extremely beautiful films that were made, but in mainstream cinema you had this issue. um all the way to the 90s, when, with the rise of this feeling of, cosmopolitan dreams that became less social in nature, more individual in nature. You had, the whole rise of Shah Rukh Khan romance and, DDLJ, which I will tell you, I grew up on a staple diet of DDLJ and Pride and Prejudice. So I thought my Mr. Darcy would be waiting for me in the middle of mustard fields with a mandolin in his hand for the longest time. Till I realized how misogynist that film is. She is waiting for the man she loves to come and rescue her from her father. Matlab, where is your agency of choice? So all the narratives had the women play roles that help the man's character or the man's image, which sort of continued all the way till the recent past. I mean, if you look at the two greatest hits last year, they were War and Kabir Singh and Simba. So, what does that tell you? Hyper toxic masculinity oriented films. Films where the man is coming out as a savior of wanting to take badla because the behen was raped. Again, so passive. Was raped kya hota hai? Rape is done. It's an action. It is not a bolt of
Not
lightning.
something that happens to you.
Exactly. तो मतलब आप ये देखिए कि as a society we are lapping up these films, which is why it is so critical for films within mainstream to come up with engaging changed narratives. And there is a shift. One massive shift is the cinema of Anubhav Sinha. So if you watch Mulk, Article 15, and Thappad, all three films, the way they perceive women, the politics of it all. In Mulk, the fact that it is the woman fighting the case who's also a daughter-in-law, which actually has nothing to do with the whole story. That normalizing of that relationship, the change of the dynamic of the father or the father-in-law, not the proverbial patriarchal image of Ja Simran Jeele apni zindagi, to actually an inclusive figure is a pivotal shift. So it's important to recognize these shifts, or Thappad for that matter. Whoever has not seen the film, I would genuinely request you to see it, because these are the things that you hear. Are ek thappad hi to mara hai. It's that, and why it's never just a slap, right? So that is changing. Or when you have a film like Dil Dhadakne Do, for all its gloss and style and all of that, you have some very very critical questions on the agency of the woman in the character played by Priyanka Chopra, which are very very prevalent questions, and a feminist man in Farhan Akhtar. So you can see how slowly, steadily we are sort of altering a few things. Like, I think one of the best written characters in the recent past for women, in my opinion, is Safina from Gully Boy. She is brave, she's out there, she has ambition. And there is this one beautiful scene that she talks about where she says, Party mein jana hai, lipstick lagani hai. This little freedoms that girls, that women are fighting for, those are the freedoms that you are finally seeing in one film out of so many that get made, but at least you can see it, right? So it's important, because what you're trying to change is 70 years of language, yaar. मतलब you're trying to change words like तेरा पीछा ना मैं छोड़ूंगा सोनिए भेज दे चाहे जेल में. क्या क्या entitlement है ये? Or you are changing to चीज बड़ी है मस्त मस्त, or करूंगा मैं गंदी बात. क्या हो रहा है ये? कुंडी मत खड़काओ राजा. I mean, what is all this, यार? There are no concepts of consent. There are no concepts of respect. So all of this adds to what we call rape culture. You're legitimizing these conversations. You're saying it's okay. For the longest time, you have said ki, the idea of following a woman to a point obsessively so that she falls in love with you and says yes to you is a mark of love. No, I'm sorry, it's a mark of oppression. So as a culture, we have never understood the difference between oppression and obsession, and oppression and love. Like, really, oppressive fathers are protective, oppressive lovers are possessive. What notions are these? Yeah. So which is why I feel that cinema genuinely has the responsibility, and I think a lot of people are slowly and steadily rising up to that responsibility. When you have writers like a Varun Grover, or you have Swanand Kirkire's lyrics, or you have, Anubhav Sinha doing the kind of films that he's doing, or you have a Zoya Akhtar and a Rima Kagti who are writing, you can see the shifts happen. But it's a long way that we have to go to unlearn everything that we've tried to see. But I want everybody who's listening here, and everybody ever, your friends of friends, everyone, encourage you to, when you watch these films or listen to these songs, question, ask, what does this line mean? What is this politics trying to say? So this song that had become really popular called Abhi to party shuru hui hai. So there was a song like that, right? God, I feel old also, but that's okay. So that song, there is a full thing about how, तू जम के party कर और मैं, रात भर DJ चलेगा, and some nonsense like that. How it's all actually about power, about what I can enable for you as my girl to enjoy. Why? Why is the man the savior or the attacker or the protector? Why can't he just be an equal? Why can't he just be in love with me and not oppress me at the same time? So every time you listen to a song, every time you watch a scene, every time you read a scene, oh God, in theater, every single time, please question what you are reading, listening, and watching. It is very, very important. In theater that I have read, luckily, I have not found misogynist traits. Maybe I've just been lucky with everything that I've read. But I can tell you, I could not read Lolita. I just couldn't. I couldn't go beyond a page. So there are certain novels that, but at the same time, I love Lady Chatterley's Lover. There is conversation on desire. There's conversation on desire of the woman. So it's important to see those shifts. You need to recognize them, and then once you can see them, then you can criticize them. So and also in the context of mental health, the way women are depicted in mental health issues is also extremely misogynistic in nature. So you, like, a depressed woman is because ya to the love life has broken, or because she chose career over relationship, she is in depression, what she's doing is smoking and she's drinking, which was similar tropes that were followed by the vamps. So again, it becomes easy for you to demonize. These are the things that you need to question. So when you watch your next Madhur Bhandarkar film, look at it and ask, "Ki, why is this happening? Why are you vilifying the woman uh, for choosing a career and actually wanting success? Why is that a reason for her to be depressed, and legitimately so, right? So I think that's what I would really encourage everyone to do.
I'd like to add a little something here.
Yeah.
So by default, through the years, whatever we have grown up on has been like immensely sexist and immensely misogynist. There's no arguing. But now that new age filmmakers, not all of them, there have been some very good works like Swami I just mentioned. But most works, especially on OTT platforms and these movies that try and portray empowered women, they lack so much depth. I mean, they're just so
Yeah.
superficial. Whenever they
Yeah.
need to portray a woman who's liberated and modern, तो like sutta daru, छोटे कपड़े पहना दो, बाइक पे बिठा दो, टैटू वैटू लगा के, so that is the idea of a liberated woman. It lacks depth, and the message that it sends out, apart from that woman obviously ending up depressed like Soumya said because she's so all wrong, no, and the vamp, the whole definition of liberation for women at the level that we are fighting at, when existence is a battle, it just gives out such a wrong idea about the whole idea of equality and liberation for women.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think also to add to that, there are some. I mean, see, what happens is that it again depends on whose voice is the character being written in.
Yeah.
So there's a reason why a Safina works. There's a reason why a Priyanka Chopra in Dil Dhadakne Do works. And there's a reason why the same Priyanka Chopra in fashion does not.
Yeah.
Because you have already put on a patriarchal hat and you are already there to victimize, vilify, decide what the arc of that woman will be, than really, go into the realms of what a character can be. So
And let me tell you, like, women who are ambitious and successful are very, very happy.
yeah,
They
yeah.
are.
Single
Without
women
doubt.
are happy. Again, the whole idea of single women and single women being happy is a rarity, man.
Huh.
It's a complete rarity. And these are the kind of conversations that need to start coming up into mainstream. I think OTT is changing a few things. So there are films like Once Again that are quite lovely. There are like these shorties that you see, which are trying to sort of change the political environment. But mainstream cinema has a lot to do, as does the mainstream song. I think
Yeah.
enough is not spoken about this song. We have been talking about it in various other circles for a long time.
Like, to these Punjabi singers
Legacy
need
of,
to be like locked
yeah,
up
yeah.
in a box or something,
No,
please.
not just that, yeah. In mainstream Bollywood music, I mean, the agency of the woman is completely eclipsed. I mean,
Yeah.
what are you saying in Baji Rao Mastani? Ki nazar jo teri lagi, main diwani ho gayi. Why? So these kind of things are bizarre. You had a song in the 60s or the 50s with Lag Ja Gale, where there is the woman saying that,
Oh,
this
that
is
song.
the time when I want you to come to me. You don't know if you'll get this night again. What are we listening to? Those songs from Kabir Singh are a complete disaster, right? So I'm saying this whole thing of of what is each word, each line actually mean, and contesting it is a very, very critical part of being a part of the gender movement, really. And I think that changes quite a bit. Somebody's just pinged in the chat saying they have a question, so moderators, up to
Yeah.
you.
So I would like to say that you pointed out so many important points. Like I would want to repeat everything, but you point out a lot of things, and I completely agree with what you said. So I think I'll give the question to Tasha to ask you, and yeah.
Sure.
No, one of the listeners had a question. I think they should finish that first.
Could you
Hi,
Atul?
ma'am.
ask the question?
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
So it's great to see you give us a lot of Bollywood references and relating it with a lot of issues and problems that women face right now. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts specifically on cinema and media in general playing a large role in the objectification of women and on toxic masculinity?
I think pop culture is hugely to blame. I mean, no mincing words here. I think so. Media and cinema are reflection of culture that we live in. It feeds and it draws from real culture. So I think it's a cyclic thing, and I mean this whole thing of मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता चूड़ियां पहन के बैठा है असली मर्द है तो सामने आ, that we've been hearing from the, again, the 70s. That's when the bronze started, all the way until, and these are words that you hear in everyday language. So it's important that we recognize them. And again, I think the toxic masculinity narrative is not just pop culture to blame alone. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you need to look at your governance. You need to look at the politics that is legitimizing the idea of toxicity on an everyday basis. There is a leader in this country with so many economic, political, social disasters that have happened in the past 10 years, that the image of which is Chappan inch. What is Chappan inch? It is the greatest way of showing toxic masculinity to you. The fact that I left my wife for the good of the nation. What does that mean? You're legitimizing abandonment of a partner. And what are you trying to say? That the woman is a distraction that would not let you work. These are all tropes of toxic masculinity, yeah. So toxic masculinity and objectification of women is fed from political realities, pop culture that you watch, of which everything is a part, cinema, songs, music videos, OTT, advertising, the works. Each of this is feeding from it and is feeding back into it, which is why all of it needs to be examined holistically. Toxic masculinity has robbed men of their agency to feel, and you see that across the cinema of the 70s and the 80s for sure. 90s, with the return of Shah Rukh Khan, he at least started crying on screen, and in that you all I think 90s children, so you may not have been in the theaters while we were, and we heard people say, oh, what a sissy. Crying was weak. So that has to again slowly change. So with films like, say, a Razi, or films like a Masan, which, I mean, whoever has not watched it, please drop everything and watch that film. You see the tender sides of masculinity. You see a more holistic picture. So that is changing. But then what also shows you is this advent of Honey Singh and Badshah and everybody else that has just completely changed, the face of what was Punjabi music, which is just so beautifully inclusive, to these really strange, objectificatory rap pieces, which are deeply, deeply problematic. So yeah, so if that answers your question,
Are we overshooting the time?
I think we are.
No, ma'am, it's all right.
Ma'am,
Okay, I have a general question.
Yeah.
Any of you can. Often verbal abusive comments are neglected over sexual harassment. Do you think it's true? And what is your point of view on such issues?
I'm sorry, we missed the first part of your question.
Verbal abusive comments are like often neglected over sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Do you think even that is an issue that needs to be addressed?
Absolutely. I think we both covered that earlier on when we were both talking about violence.
Bullying, shaming, demeaning,
and
gaslighting, these are all forms of verbal abuse that leave deep mental and emotional scars. So, yes.
absolutely. And they have to be questioned again. Like, if I mean, you should actually divide the way you would address this across different microcosms. So within the space of the family, you have to contest it when you see it happen, even to you.
Yeah.
Like I gave you my own example of shifting this whole narrative of, shadi, or, oh, I used to be told you're too fat to get married, and I used to be like, what? So right now, that is a form of gaslighting, and I used to say, what does that mean? And people used to say, oh, but even the guy will want a perfect woman. I said, ye kya notions hai? Matlab, what is perfect? Whose idea of perfect, right? But yeah, and these are gaslighting statements. So you need to contest them in the space of the family.
Reason all comments like, अरे तुम्हारा रंग तो इतना साफ नहीं हो, क्या हो गया तुम्हारा, इतना काला काला क्यों हो गया मुंह? So things like this, and people will just say that and walk away without realizing how it impacts the other person, how it kills their confidence.
Yeah, and verbal abuse also has a paradigm. Like what we're talking about right now is body shaming, all the way down to when you are threatened of violence, you're threatened of rape, suggestive comments made, verbal abuse, the way it is.
Yeah.
The fact is that it happens in different spaces. So from the family to online to if it happens with anyone in the workplace to out in the market, this whole thing of eve teasing, checking women out, this is all a form of abuse, and it has to be recognized as that, and it has to be contested.
I don't understand this checking women out कि हम market जा रहे हैं लड़कियां देखने, क्या देखने जा रहे हो तुम? मतलब मैं लड़कियां नहीं देखी हैं कभी.
I don't understand.
So shocking. And this is like 40-year-old men doing it. Like, I was in Thailand and they're like 40-year-old men, 50-year-old men. वहाँ जाके लड़कियां देख रहे हैं. तो मैं अभी तक मतलब इतनी उम्र तुम्हारी हो गई. Are you not done with the female anatomy? It still fascinates you as much.
Yeah, no, and also to bring back to the point of toxic masculinity, you're not a man enough if you're not checking women out. So
अरे
it
क्या
all,
चेकआउट करना होता है लेकिन इतना?
exactly. So I'm saying it all comes back and starts getting cyclic to keep attacking it at every possible corner. But does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Thank you so much. But why do you think that such issues are like they aren't reported as much as the rest of the issues? They take it easy. Verbal comments and they I don't think they make it as they don't make it a big deal like compared to the rest of the issues.
Yeah,
See,
I think
Tharsha, we live in a country where if a woman walks up battered, bruised into a police station and says that she's been gang raped by 4 guys, she's not believed. So do you think anybody will give a damn about verbal abuse की office की meeting में हमारी बात नहीं सुनी, बंदे ने बोला तो सुन लिया. So those kind of things that are very very like very first world in comparison compared to we are still struggling to make ourselves heard simply for being left alive. So that's how basic it is.
I would still say that it's also, I mean, not to say that we shouldn't report it.
Huh.
Like, it needs to be reported, it needs to be talked about, wo to hai. But the fact of the matter is that, like Shuchi is saying, we are living in a country where marital rape is not a crime, yaar. Rapes we are not stopping.
But
Matlab,
that said, in our immediate environment, like within your friend circle, within your family, within your colleagues, if you see this happening, you should definitely call it out. That's probably the best we can do. Talk
yeah,
about it, call it
yeah.
out, criticize it. Put your foot down. That this is not acceptable to you. And if more and more people do that, probably we'll bring about that cultural shift.
Yeah, and I would actually say that one needs to call it out and one needs to stand by people who are calling it out as well. See,
Yeah.
what happens in our structure and in our culture in the most easy manner is ostracization. Okay, that comes naturally to us. And it is very easy to ostracize women, especially if they're strong headed women. There is just no doubting that. So the fact is that solidarities need to be created. And yes, look, I think everybody facing abuse needs to first be told that reporting it will not make matters worse. Second, that reporting it that you have an ecosystem that takes care of you when when a report has been made. We don't have those ecosystems, yeah. We don't have those answers, and so many people would be just merely afraid if something like this was that you really had to go out there and report. With what would the consequences be? Things are not known. So either we are transparent about all of this and we tell people what this means, what it is going to really arrive at, and the kind of things that you're going to have to deal with, what are the consequences, and then enable them to report. And at the same time, I think the recognition of what is verbal abuse is also important. Chalta hai versus recognizing a sentence as an abuse is an education in itself, which is required right now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was very insightful.
Ma'am, we have one last question for you.
Yeah.
So, being in a society that we are right now, media plays a very big role in our lives. Like, we can't deny it because it's true. So, what do you think how much does media affect this violence and the fact that violence is happening against women?
Like we said, it's pivotal. And I'm assuming when you say media, you are also including news into this now.
Yes.
It is. I mean, look at the way, oh God, look at the way news talks about acts of violence and rape here. Look at the way they talk about suicides. You have a huge example in the way Riya Chakrabarti was vilified in this country for an act by her romantic partner. So it's all a part of the same culture, whether it is entertainment media, it is news. Look at how news is reported. Look at the language. It says a woman walking in at midnight was raped. What is wrong with that sentence? Everything. Because it was not like the action of rape is done by a man or men. Why is that missing from the headline? It's passive. A woman was raped as she was walking at midnight on the road. You're trying to tell me that the issue is walking on the road at midnight, and the issue is not the man actually raping the woman. So the way you use language changes the way you interpret realities. the same headline, had it said, two men rape a woman as she walks on the road, would give your reaction, would instill a very different reaction in you than a woman raped at midnight, because that puts the blame on her as a survivor or as a victim, either way. So I think media overall is again a byproduct and an offspring of the culture that we are in. You can't divest it. Having said that, by the virtue of reaching out to so many people, there's a greater responsibility that media of all kinds holds, whether it's music, entertainment, cinema, OTT, news, whatever, radio, all of that. And we need to be cognizant of the language that we are using, whether it is laddering up to rape culture or is it dissipating it. And at the same time, violence and violent words need to be questioned. My God, like something that I actually wanted to mention, and I'll just take 2 minutes in mentioning it. Look at the way films are shot. Look at the way songs are shot. So item songs, the fact that they are called item is a problem itself, because the woman is the item and objectificatory and all of that. But when you watch a song with a woman at the center in the 70s, and watch a song like Sheila Ki Jawani now. The men are here. They are sticking to the woman's body, violating any idea of space. The camera is so close and is literally going inch on the woman's body. All of this is in a way trying to propagate or legitimizing the fact that you need to see women like this. It is deeply problematic. When you have lines like gatkale mujhe alcohol se, what, like, it is abusive towards women, these kind of lines, right? So each of this needs to be contested with as much aggression to try and change the way we are trying to depict or talk about or talk of women in media, if that answers your question. Shuchi has a point. You're on mute, Baba. Can't
Suchi
hear.
ma'am, you're on mute.
I'm saying I have to make a hard stop because I have somewhere to be. So guys, please carry on, and I will be happy to answer any questions on your Insta handle in case you have any. Is that okay?
I think we'll be concluding now anyway, right? If you can
Yes,
just
ma'am.
take
All
We're
right.
5
almost
minutes.
done.
Um,
Yes,
thank
we're
you so
almost done. I think we have one question from Asfiha in the chat box.
Suchi, why don't
What
you
is
take it before you leave?
Sorry.
Why don't you take that question before you leave? I can't see it only.
Okay. What's the question?
what is the advice you give to us to overcome the society as women? This question is from Asfiha.
The question in itself, we don't have to overcome it. We need to sort of bring about a change, and in a more inclusive manner that includes men and the whole LGBT community. I mean, it's change is going to be very slow, but it has to start from us. So, like I said earlier, if you see any any form of abuse, any form of violence, mild, moderate, severe, anything, call it out. Stand by the person. Stand by the people who are fighting it. So at a micro level, of course, at a policy level, things need to change, but that's not really in our control. But what is this? So that is one place we all can begin. It's not very difficult to do either.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
It
I
was
think with
lovely
that
to
we
be
can.
here. I'm so sorry, but I'll have to cut this short because I really have to leave.
It's okay, ma'am. We're almost done. Thank you.
Okay, bye. So nice talking to you guys. Thank you to everybody who's come here.
Thank you so
Suchi
much for
ma'am,
being.
ma'am, I would just like to take a
Yes.
moment to thank you for your presence here tonight. You have
Thank you so
enlightened
much for
us, and
inviting me.
sure, it was our pleasure. And I'm sure all the listeners here, you have opened our eyes to a lot of issues here, and I would like to thank you very much for that.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been such a lively discussion, and Soumya, we need to catch up after this
Yeah,
sometime. Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
See you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Any other questions that anybody would like me to take? Or if you're done, then that's that.
If any of you have a question, post it in the chat box, or you can unmute and ask the question. Maria says she had a great time listening to all of us.
I just read that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure. And just, I think, in conclusion, requesting you all to just keep reading, keep articulating, keep questioning, keep constantly when you're watching, ask, what does this mean? Why is this being said like this? Is it derogatory? Is it a power struggle? Because that's the only way to keep it really going. Tanvi is saying she wanted to ask something. Do we have time to take the last question?
Yes, ma'am. Surely, one more question would be okay.
Yes, ma'am. One more question. We're doing one more question.
Okay.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, like, was there any moment in like your life that when you personally faced some situation where you were confused at what to do and what not to do, like related to these things, like where you were yourself confused and like very doubtful?
I think there would be two such occasions. One was, okay, first things, when you are facing violence or you're in a space that, you see the perpetration of violence happening, the decision to fight it is instinctive, but how you want to do it is never easy. So you have to constantly have your wits about you as well. So I was abused as a child. I decided to come out with that story to my parents 20 years later. And when I was talking to them about that story, I was like, I wonder how they're going to take it. Why am I even doing this? What's really the point now? It's been so long. But again, because as a feminist, as a woman in, in the movement, you owe it, to talk about something that has traumatized you in the past. And entire credit to my parents who listened to it patiently, um, did not dismiss it, understood it, and actually asked me what I wanted to do about it. So that was one occasion, and I think acting on it and making sure that I articulated it and pointed it out was probably the best thing I could do. So that was one. The second was I was alone at night in Gurgaon in an auto at I think 11:30 or something raat ko, and we were being chased by a jeep. And I was the only person, like, apart from the auto driver, who was in it. And he had told me कि मैम आप ना बस मुड़ के मत देखिएगा. I will get you home, but just don't turn around and see. And at that point in time, everything in my instinct was telling me to get off and, like, take on a fight. But I didn't. And I was confused. For those 2-3 minutes when we were being chased, I was genuinely confused that, what should I do? Should I ask him to take me to a cop station? Shall I just get home? Shall I just call up, a friend? Should I just call up my folks and, sort of pretend to be on the phone? What should I do? But I think by the time I could arrive at a decision, the chasing stopped. So then I didn't have to do really anything. But yeah, that was definitely an occasion when I was confused, and I didn't have an answer. But in retrospect, I think what I would have done is insisted that the whatever's closest, if a police chowki or a check post would have been closest, that or home or a guard station that would be closest is where I would have ideally wanted to go.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was really helpful for us.
Thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And Shuchi, was wonderful to have a conversation with you, meeting for the first time. So thanks for having us on your panel, and we hope we were helpful.
You were very helpful, ma'am. It was very insightful having you today.
Thank you. My pleasure. Take care, everybody. Keep the feminist flag flying high.
So I think with this we can end, and whoever wants to leave can leave. Uh, I think the executive boards of both the clubs can stay back along with ma'am. You can also stay back
Oh,
if you.
oh, I'm supposed to stay? Okay, I'll stay.
Uh,
I mean, if I'm allowed to go, I'd be very happy. But if I'm not allowed to go, I shall stay.
Oh no, ma'am,
ma'am,
it's okay. We don't want to hold you back.
go ahead.
Okay, great. Because I had a surgery recently, so I need to sort of take some time for that now. But if there's anything you need from me, you know where to reach me. I'd be happy to answer any questions and anything else that you need.
Please take
Thank you
care,
so
ma'am. And we would like to extend a huge thank you to you for being here with us today. All those topics that you touched and spoke about really opened our eyes. And I've never seen a woman speaking so bravely, so strongly. And I'm very inspired by you. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. You should, there are far better, more inspirational women around. It's solidarity circle. So just keep discovering more and more women. You'll realize that there's so much more to see. Yeah.
Of course.
Okay. Bye. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.